For the beginning of our Financial Futures unit, we will dive into long-term financial planning. All of the decisions you make starting as a young adult that will enable you to meet your financial goals and fund your retirement. Let's get started. Back in the second lesson, we talked about budgeting, and so this may seem like a repeat of that conversation. But in this lesson, we'll take a longer view and think bigger. As you may remember from that lesson, only about 33% of Americans prepare a detailed monthly household budget. And beyond that, even fewer, only about 30%, prepare a long-term financial plan outlining their savings and goals in detail. Knowing from the article you just read that most Americans aren't saving enough for retirement, you can see that it's important to think about how you can make this a foundation of your own financial practices. First, let's clarify what we mean by long-term savings. In the budgeting lesson, we talked about having an emergency fund, which is what we would consider short-term savings, or an amount that you've set aside to deal with any emergencies or to fund your expenses for several months if you lost your job or suffered some other unexpected but temporary setback. When we think about long-term savings, however, we're going to use a guideline of thinking about things that are planned or that we expect to happen and that are likely to happen at least 5 years in the future. For example, you may not know now when you will retire, but it's probably safe to say that you will plan to retire at some point and that you will do so more than 5 years from now. That will be neither unexpected nor temporary. You may also not have any kids yet, or if you do, they may be rather young, but if you're raising children, it's reasonable to assume you may want to help them with their future education. So now that we know we're thinking about planned expenses and things that will likely occur 5 years or more in the future, what specifically does that mean you should be saving for? Once you have a monthly budget established, it's important to also establish or examine your priorities. What do you want to be able to pay for and when, and how important is that to you? If you want to retire at age 60 and that's a firm goal for you, that may be your number one priority. But if you decide that paying for your child to attend college is more important, then you may place that ahead of your retirement goal and decide that while you'd still like to retire at 60, you may need to push that back to age 63 to enable you to realize your other goals first and help your child. As you look at your budget and your priorities, you're going to consider your options and what it will take to get you to your goals. For instance, you may decide that some of your current fixed or major expenses are actually not aligned with your longer-term priorities. Knowing where you are and where you want to go can help you consider all of your options. For example, if your current rent is $600 a month, that may work for you right now, and you may be able to afford it in the strictest sense. But once you establish long-term goals, you may decide that you prefer to find a less expensive housing option. Living in a cheaper location perhaps, or sharing a home with one or more housemates to allow you to reach other goals sooner. Would paying $100 less a month in rent allow you to meet a goal of paying off your student loans more quickly, sacrificing some short-term convenience, comfort, or even luxury for long-term stability? Or are you actually spending less than you could be on housing? Maybe you own a home and could be putting $100 a month more toward the principal on your mortgage payment by reallocating money from somewhere else in your budget and getting you to a paid-off house even sooner. These are longer-term decisions because you often can't simply move with little or no notice or quickly buy, sell, or trade cars. But if you are meeting your short-term expenses, you may be able to make longer-term changes to adjust your budget 6 months, a year, or even 5 years from now. What are some common things you might want to save for? For many young adults, you may be thinking about returning to school at some point, or you may be thinking about paying off student loan debt or saving for your own children's education. Purchasing a home is another common long-term goal. You've already learned about how to weigh various housing options, and the sooner you know what type of home you might want, the sooner you can start watching home values, planning your budget, and saving for a down payment to make that dream a reality. You should also think about retirement, not only when you want to retire, but what kind of income and lifestyle you hope to have from your savings when you do, so that you can have the lifestyle that makes you happy once you leave the full-time workforce. Do you want to travel? You'll need to plan and budget for that. Maybe you'd prefer to be a homebody, but you want to have your home completely paid for. You'll need to determine what that goal is and how much it will take to reach it. Finally, there may be other goals that are important to you. Quitting work so you can own your own business, perhaps, or taking a year off to travel, or even owning a second home. Whatever is important to you should make it onto your list of priorities and be factored into both your long and short-term budgets. If education is a priority for your long-term financial planning, there are a number of ways you can think about saving, depending on who you're saving for. If you're saving for your own future education, the best bet might be to put money into a savings account or CD at the bank. While you could make more money if you invest in the stock market, if the market takes a downturn just as you're ready to use the money, you might have to delay your plan to go to school. So establish a separate account so that your savings is clearly directed to this goal. Determine how much you'll need and when you plan to start your studies. Then divide up the amount, add it to the long-term savings category in your monthly budget. If you're thinking about saving for your kids' future, there are a number of ways you might do that. First, you could also use a savings account or something similar for their savings. You could also establish a Roth IRA for your child. We'll discuss Roth accounts in greater detail in just a moment, as they're normally used for retirement, but there is a provision that allows withdrawals for certain circumstances, including qualified educational expenses, so this may be an option. 529 college plans are specific saving plans established by the government that allow for parents to invest their own after-tax money into diversified, low-cost stock and bond funds, and then withdraw the money tax-free for educational expenses. Another option is a Coverdell educational savings account, which is an alternative to a 529. While they're similar in many ways, a Coverdell allows more flexibility in terms of what counts as a qualifying expense. Using this type of account, you could fund not only primary and secondary school tuition for your child, but also things they would need like uniforms and tutoring. Prepaid tuition plans are also popular with some families. They have similar features to a 529 plan, but are designed for parents who know their child will attend a public school in their state. If your child chooses a private college or one in another state, you will get some return on the investment, but not the full value. For example, if you prepaid a year of tuition in Texas at $12,000 and your child attends a Texas school that's covered by the plan, even if the tuition is now $18,000, you'll still get that year for the $12,000 you paid. But if your child decides to attend school in Arkansas, for example, you would perhaps get $12,000 to $14,000 toward that tuition bill, but not the full year of tuition you had intended to pay for. Finally, your state may offer other plans, or you can consider investing in stable options like treasury bonds to save for college. Saving for a home is pretty straightforward, but it is major and requires some planning. First, research the probable cost for a home in the area that meets your needs. Some of the tools in Lesson 5 will be helpful to you. If you know what area you want to live in, what size and style of home you want, you can zero in on the probable price range, factor in typical inflation and housing prices in that area, and then use that to set a goal for the amount you'll need. Your goals should consider how much down payment you hope to have. 20% is a great goal, and along with solid credit, a down payment that large will help you qualify for a loan with very favorable terms. You might also consider working on a goal to improve your credit score if applicable while you save the money for your down payment. If this is your first home, don't forget that once you own property, you'll probably need a bigger emergency fund. So at the same time you're saving up for this long-term goal, plan to increase your short-term savings as well so that your first year in a new home isn't financially disastrous due to an unplanned and unaffordable emergency. Once you know what your target date is and how much you want to save, the best way is are a dedicated savings account or CD, or perhaps a Roth IRA, which does allow for some withdrawals for first-time home purchase. While your retirement may seem very far off to you right now, it's not too early to start thinking about it. Given the increasing life expectancies in our country, If you plan well and budget appropriately, you may be able to retire at 63 and live for another 30 or more years, and you want to be sure that your retirement fund lasts as long as you need it to. If you run out of money at 85, you're not likely to be in a great position at that point to get a new job. So it's really important to plan now so that your retirement years can be enjoyable and secure. So, when should you start saving? The answer is simple. As soon as possible. While you may feel that you have other more urgent priorities and that retirement is way too far off to be worried about it, saving early can have a profound impact. Business Insider outlines a case in which two individuals start saving at different times. Emily starts putting $200 per month into a retirement account with an estimated 6% rate of return when she is 25. Dave, meanwhile, starts saving the same amount just 10 years later at age 35. If they each continue to save $200 a month until they turn 65, Emily will have contributed $96,000, while Dave will have contributed $72,000. This is where the magic of compound interest kicks in. We saw the potential negatives of this in the lesson on credit cards, and now we see the positives, because Emily will have more than $400,000 saved, while Dave has just $203,000 in his account. Though she only started 10 years earlier and actually only saved $24,000 more over that time, the power of compound interest means she will have nearly $200,000 more in her retirement savings. Now that you see the value of saving earlier, what are some common ways you might choose to save for retirement? First, there are employer pensions. These are less and less common than they used to be, but do still exist in some fields and from some employers, and are more common for employees who are part of a union. You pay into the fund and your employer pays a significant portion, and then you receive a guaranteed income when you retire at a certain age. Another common workplace savings tool is the 401k or 403b plan. These are what are known as tax-deferred plans that you contribute to via payroll deduction at your work. And that means you don't pay taxes on the money you earn now. You defer the taxes. The money goes directly into this account and must remain there, hopefully growing in value as it's invested in stocks, bonds, or other funds, until you retire or reach a certain age and can withdraw it with no penalty. You pay the tax when you withdraw it, but because your income is likely to be less each year that you're in retirement than it is while you're working full-time, you may save taxes in the long run. 401ks and 403bs are very similar, but a 403b is specifically for employees of a nonprofit organization. Typically, you contribute a certain amount as a percent of your paycheck, up to whatever the legal contribution limit is as set by the government for that year. And your employer may choose to match your contribution up to a certain percentage. For example, if you put 12% of your gross before tax pay into your 401k, and your employer matches the first 3%, that means you will be contributing 15% total, including their match. The money you put in remains yours, other than changes to the funds you've invested in based on the market. Your employer, however, may vest their contributions, meaning that if you leave your job within a certain period of time, you would only get part of what they've contributed up to that point. That amount typically goes up over the course of several years until you become fully vested, meaning at that point everything they have contributed and everything they continue to contribute is also yours to keep in addition to your own contributions. Some employers don't even require vesting and make their employers fully and immediately vested from day one. There are also options outside of a workplace account. Especially if you're self-employed, you'll want to be aware of these. You can open an IRA or an individual retirement account at many banks or investment firms. There are two key types of IRAs, traditional and Roth. In a traditional IRA, you deposit pre-tax money, similar to a 401k, and pay taxes when you withdraw the money at retirement age. In a Roth IRA, however, you deposit money you've already paid taxes on, and it grows tax-free in the account until the eligible withdrawal age. You don't need to pay income tax when you withdraw it in retirement because you already paid the income tax before you deposited it. And don't forget there are always savings accounts, CDs, and stocks and bonds. While these aren't designed exclusively for retirement savings, they may be part of your portfolio. Finally, let's close this lesson with a few key things to remember. First, regardless of how you're saving or what types of accounts you use, just save. The sooner you start, the more you'll have. Pay yourself first. Employer savings plans or automatic direct deposits to savings are great because they allow you to put money in savings before it ever reaches your spending budget. And many employer plans allow you to automatically increase the amount you're saving each year. If you're putting in 8% of your income today and you know that you typically get a salary increase each August, you can choose to set that automatic adjustment to increase that contribution by 1% every August. And in just a few short years, you're saving 12% of your gross pay without ever even really having to miss that money. Finally, don't borrow against your retirement. If possible, you should never borrow out of your retirement fund or withdraw money early unless you have no other options. While we mentioned Roth IRAs as potential sources of funding for a housing deposit or education, ideally those would be a separate Roth IRA that you've set up, knowing that that may be a use for it. Because of compound interest, any money you withdraw from your retirement means there's less there to grow in future years. And if you take a withdrawal rather than a loan before you reach the allowed age, you'll not only deplete your account and your opportunity for greater growth, you'll also pay taxes on the income and a 10% penalty for the withdrawal. Some parents are tempted to borrow from their retirement to pay for a child's college, and it's a generous impulse, but it's important to realize that your child will have many years to make money to pay off loans, and you may even choose to help them do so, but you will have fewer years to rebuild your retirement savings. We mentioned earlier in the lesson establishing a Roth IRA for your child, and that's a great way to help them without borrowing from your own retirement, and it gives them a head start on saving for their own long-term future. I hope you've had some helpful information from this lesson about the considerations that you need to take into account when you're saving for your own long-term goals and future.